All right, y'all. Here we go. We're here in the morning, early in the morning, sunrise sermon for Sunday. Glad to do it. Glad to be here. And we're still talking about friendship, brotherly love, and today's an occasion where we will cover um, David again and David's um, betrayal by a good friend who happens to this is family ties will mess you up. Let's put it that way. Once we see this, you'll get what I'm saying. This scripture comes plainly, right? It comes plainly from Psalm 55, verse 12. Actually, not 12 to 13, 12 to 14. And we're going to read the New Living Translation. And it says, "It is not an enemy who taunts me. I could bear that. It is not my foes who so arrogantly insult me. I could have hidden from them. Instead, it is you, my equal, my companion, and close. What good fellowship we once enjoyed as we walked together to the house of God." Jesus, right? We were tight, you know, a close friend. We enjoyed good fellowship. I could have handled it if it was somebody else other than you, but it was you. You know what I mean? That sticks out. It stands out. It makes us take pause and look at some things that are going on, you know, within the realm of friendship, where we might say, well, you know what? Maybe that person isn't a real friend. I mean, consider it like this. There's another place in the book of Psalms where it might be hinted, right, that they're talking about the same folks. But we at least know they're the same type of folks. And lo and behold, David again, he writes this in Psalm 41, verse 9. "Even my own familiar friend in whom I trusted, who ate my bread, has lifted up his heel against me. Not only did I trust him, but I broke bread with him." And breaking bread, more so than these days, breaking bread is a form of fellowship that allows us to get intimate with other folks, right? That means we've invited them into our domicile and we've opened our doors to them and we've made them feel at home and we've made them a part of our household. And dang, he said the brother lifted up his heel against him as if to strike him and strike him down. Form of attack and offense. Right? That's a possibility. But when you read the entirety of Psalm 109, right? When you read the entirety of Psalm 109, the title is a plea for judgment of the false accusers. Is it David saying, judge these folks? They're accusing me I've been wrongly accused by them. And I put the link here in the chat, Psalm 109. When you read that, you can see the correlation between all these different Psalms. Psalm 109, Psalm 41 and 9, Psalm 55, 12 through 14, and a certain section of Second Samuel where it runs and breaks down the conspiracy that Absalom conspires. And it includes a gentleman known as Ahithophel, the Gilonite, who was David's counselor, right? And you've got to look at this and see this correlation between these scriptures and what they sound like. It says that at one point, Ahithophel was advisor to both David and Absalom. This is at the point where Absalom is seeking to take over the kingdom. This is where Absalom is usurping the authority of David and causing an uprising. Absalom has conspired with multiple men of power within the kingdom, and Ahithophel, being one of David's closest advisors, has been recruited. It says that not long after David mourned for his son, in 2 Samuel 13:37, he allowed his son to return to the palace, 2 Samuel 14, but he wouldn't lay eyes on him, right? You ever watch Dallas, JR and Jock and Bobby? Kind of like those family dynamics that you see play out in the Bible, you can see play out in these evening soap operas, Dallas, Falcon Crest, all these things. And this type of dynamic of, I'll let you back in the house, but you better not lay eyes on me. I'll let you back in the house, but we ain't got nothing to say to each other. That becomes the opening and the lead-in to Absalom's conspiracy to take over David's kingdom. Look at how it plays out. Look in your Bible, look how it plays out. And upon Absalom's arrival in Jerusalem, it's stated in 2 Samuel 16 and 15, the 15th verse of chapter 16, it says, and Ahithophel was with him, saying that of all these conspirators listed, of all the people that you didn't expect to be there, Ahithophel was with Absalom. And this was in confirming what someone says at the end of 2 Samuel 15 in verse 31. Someone says, it says it here, then someone told David, saying, Ahithophel is among the conspirators with Absalom. You know how people share stuff, say stuff, right? They're trying to say something, right? I'm not trying to be messy, but I'm not trying to be all up in your business, but right. And here it is. They're saying something to David about, well, you know, your homeboy is with your son. They're trying to take over your empire. You know, your advisor is over there in your boy's ear telling him how to take over your empire. You see what I'm saying? And so it's going down like that in the kingdom that David reigned because of the fallout from the sin of David. And let me help you out even further to get a better picture. Ahithophel is identified as the father of Eliam. And Eliam is identified as the father of Bathsheba. That makes Ahithophel the grandfather of Bathsheba. Bathsheba is the mother of Solomon, right? And she had some other children according to First Chronicles. But get the picture, get the family dynamic. Ahithophel is Solomon's great-grandfather. And Ahithophel may not have been okay with what David did in getting Bathsheba from her husband. Remember how that played out. And so keep in mind, Ahithophel isn't part of the royal lineage, but by default and birthright, his great grandson is. He's connected to the family tree, but he's not in the lineage of David. And so he was still an advisor to David. And he had a family tie to David as being the great grandfather of Solomon. Ooh. Ooh. That can get messy, right? And so there's all kinds of theological theories on where they stood as men, where they stood as friends, how they had, worked and fought and came up with ways to deal with the uprisings of common enemies, but how much of an enemy was David in the heart of Ahithophel all these years, as he had shamed, embarrassed, scandalized, whatever you want to call it, his granddaughter. You mean daddies are one thing, grandpa's another thing. Daddy's got one way of looking at it, papa's got another way of looking at it. And so, hey, how could this play out to where Ahithophel could use David's own son against him and advise him to take over and be in control? How could this play out? How could this be? You better watch out. You better take care. This thing can go down right there, according to the Bible, in the midst of it. And as you're being made aware of it by people who are quote unquote on the outside of things, you find out you're further outside of it than anybody because the people you were closest to have now turned on you and you're getting ready to leave town in shame. That's what happened to David, right? He forgave the boy. He let him back in the house, and he stayed with him for 2 years. And he didn't see David for 2 years, and then boom, now we're hatching a scheme to be declared king and take authority and power from the person who was forgiving you. And then on the part of his advisor, Ahithophel, hey, he is sitting there like, what's the deal? You messed with my family, my reputation. What did you expect? Me to just sit here and continue to serve you? Come on. So this is not this is not the type of friendship we wanna see. This is not the type of friendship that we want to see in like that. And it was definitely not a good thing in my eyes when I see that David is still in shock. And David is still turned off by Ahithophel's failure to stay with him and his continued advice against David to Absalom. Now listen to this from 2 Samuel 17:23. 2 Samuel 17:23. This is a classic demise of a betrayer, right? When they figure out that everything's not going to be followed as they had hoped, when they finally discover that everything's not going to be going as planned, they try to escape. And this is how it turns out when they try to escape. It says it like this. And this is the New King James Version of 2 Samuel 17:23. Now when Ahithophel saw that his advice was not followed, he saddled a donkey and arose and went home to his house, to his city. Then he put his household in order and hanged himself and died, and he was buried in his father's tomb. Brother hung himself. Brother hung himself and took his own life and was out, because neither David nor Absalom was following his advice at that time, because he was now persona non grata. He was no longer a trusted friend. He was no longer a trusted advisor. He was no longer that voice of reason to follow. And so here we go. You've got to remember what real friendship is described as. We talk about this as being how conspiracy corrupts brotherly love. But in order to get to that conspiracy, someone had to feel thrown off. Someone had to feel like they weren't part of the circle anymore. Someone had to feel like they weren't part of the family anymore. Someone had to feel like an outsider. They had to feel betrayed themselves. They had to deal with some letdown on their own. And so here we go. We see that both Absalom and Ahithophel both had grudges against David. As I mentioned, Ahithophel had things dealing with his granddaughter that had produced his great grandson that might have shed a bad light on this woman who was married to a warrior, but was taken into the bed of the king. He might have had a problem with David about that. He might have had an issue with David about that. You know? Absalom. As David is mourning and in his depression and in his melancholy state, his household is falling apart, and one brother rapes the sister, and Absalom, seeing that David is in no condition to handle it and provide retribution for that, he actually gets revenge for his sister and kills the other brother. And seeing how David still has little to no response with that, Absalom becomes a bit mannish within the household. And even early in that point, you could see where Ahithophel began to get in his ear. You've got to be mindful of what true friendship should entail. A friend loves at all times. Your neighbor, right? You should love your neighbor, and a neighbor that's better than a distant relative, as a help and a resource. Friend is like a brother. We should be living together in unity. And as Hebrews 13:1 says, we should let brotherly love continue. Friendship and faith are connection, community, and companionship. That's what we should have. And if we can't see that in its entirety within the relationship, something is going wrong. Something is flipped. Something's upside down, and we better get it straight. We better figure it out, because there's a problem with our system. If these are the only types of friends you have that are looking to conspire and betray you, looking to strike you down and take you down a peg or two, then you've created a set of enemies, not just upset friends. Take the time, evaluate, am I doing the things that I need to be to uphold the evidence of what good friendship is? Am I showing brotherly love in the way that I connect and work with other brothers? Am I being the one who is a friend who loves at all times and extending myself as a brother in adversity? What am I doing? If I'm not doing that, I'm not doing what we've discussed. Hey, hope this works for you. I hope this is helpful to you. I hope this gives you some form of understanding of how to continue with brotherly love. God be with you, and God bless.